thing that I want to most say about what we're doing here is that we've always had this feeling that somehow we can just work it out. If there's another species that wants to talk to us, they'll say what's on their mind, we'll say what's on our mind. Some kind of confusion will exist and maybe harmony will happen. But then again, Brent, I remember back to the very beginning, of course, when we were much younger, and there was the Twilight Zone episode called To Serve Man, right?
Yes.
And what happened, this other race, and I loved it as a kid, these super tall, weird looking dudes showed up, and they wore these long kind of gowns, and they had their spacecraft, and they said that they were here to help us, and they did, right? Then they made the deserts bloom, and
yes. Yep.
It was great. And then we got a hold of their book, and it said To Serve Man, and this is so freaking great. They're here to help. And right now, as a kid, I didn't realize that, but today you'd say, thank God somebody is here to help, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We sure need some help. But so the main character in Twilight Zone then is like 22 and a half minutes of programming or something. So it goes fast. But this one guy who's been sort of the leader of the band is getting on this flight. He's going to go to their home planet. And the people who have been looking into trying to translate the How to Serve Man book yell at him, don't get on the ship. And why?
Because he's going to be dinner.
It's a cookbook. Wow. I don't know. When you first saw that one as a kid, what was your take?
Honestly, I was of the age when I first started watching The Twilight Zone where pretty much every episode upset me or scared me or something. And that, I think that probably the idea that aliens were going to eat us stayed with me for longer than I would have liked. I think the interesting thing is it's something that we culturally still carry around with us, that we still worry about. What if that's their intent? What if they're fattening us up, or what if they're keeping us alive that they're farming us? We've heard all of these theories.
All of it. And in fact, we hear it often with the cattle mutilations out there. It's like, okay, if it's really NHI that are mutilating cattle and draining them of their blood and taking their vital organs, how do we know they're not doing that to us? There have been reports of human mutilations. Fewer, I think, I hope. Anyway, the thing I want to just lay on the table for us right now is back when Dolan and I were writing AD After Disclosure, I believe it was 2010 when we were writing it. Okay.
Wow, so there was, ago.
Yeah, I know it does seem, it's like how time flies, right? Yeah. But so we were thinking about a lot of things, and we were kicking things like you and I do all the time, right? It's like testing theories. What about this? What about that? Yeah. And then something happens in the middle of that process that just laid something out onto the table for us. And we had a chapter, I believe, called Threat Narrative. And here's what got laid on the table. It turns out that Stephen Hawking, the famous scientist, right? The man he was super, super bright, but his body had atrophied, and it was all very strange. But he was on a Discovery Channel miniseries, Into the Universe with Stephen Hawking. This is like April of 2010. And Dolan and I are like, our sleeves are rolled up, and we're working on this book. And then he ends up saying, and this is the part that's famous, the quote is, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. And I kind of love that because it's the role reversal. If indeed there are aliens here, or an NHI that is technologically advanced over us, aren't they, in fact, the people from the old world coming to the new world?
The conquerors, yeah.
Yeah.
The invaders. No, it's true. And going back to your original point of the hope is that we could work it out with aliens, but in fact, there's a lot of historical precedent that we can't work it out with ourselves.
Right.
So it's a hard kind of wish to see coming true that aliens are going to come down. And as we're going to take a look at in at least one of the movies here, but really, I think it is a theme across all of these movies is communication, right? When cultures clash, communication is key. And if they don't understand each other or they can't even speak to each other, then so much for trying to work things out.
I remember that Hawking made the argument. He wasn't saying that aliens were going to be evil. That was not his point. His point was that any civilization capable of crossing interstellar distances to get here, against all the odds and all the distance and time, they would possess technology that was so overwhelmingly superior to ours that any meeting with them might not accrue to our benefit. And in fact, I remember watching that episode and it was just mind-bending. He's talking about imagining things. And I always thought, listen, the guy, super bright, but he was limited physically in what he could do. So what he did is he thought. He used that brilliant mind of his to think. And one of the things he did and talked about in that first program was he imagined an advanced civilization that had exhausted its home planet's resources and had become spacefaring nomads. And the quote was, looking to conquer and colonize whatever planets they can reach. So the problem is, of course, we have rather naively sent out Voyager unmanned craft with gold records telling people what we look like, what we know, how to find us. And it wasn't that Hawking was saying, don't listen for signals. He was in favor of SETI. He was saying, listen, if somebody is sending out something, you want to receive it. He was just saying, exercise a little caution before you send it out. I think that's what's driving us in this episode. This is a chance for us to talk about, are there movies that demonstrate contact between not just individual aliens and individual humans, but civilizations, if you will. And sometimes movies there's a bunch of them. There's everything from Alien Nation and District 9, where actually it goes worse for the aliens than it does for us, right?
Yes.
And then, of course, there's The Day the Earth Stood Still, where they show up and give us an ultimatum. There's Independence Day, of course, where it's just plain bad. They're looking for trouble. They're not looking for help.
Yeah, I think the headline here is that when humans and aliens meet, spoiler alert, it doesn't end well.
No.
For one side or the other. And again, going back to kind of historical precedent, the equivalent of aliens is when the Earth was still being explored, a dominant culture would go to a indigenous culture and they would be overtaken and conquered. I think the only example I can think of was New Zealand, where the Maori were not conquered. They were integrated into culture, which is why New Zealand's such an interesting place to visit.
It is. And haven't you lived there before?
No, I thought about living there. I visited it for a month and I love it. I would highly recommend it to everyone, and not just if you're a Lord of the Rings fan.
Wait, let's move on to a kind of a movie that, again, I bet very few people are thinking about the movie that we want to start this conversation with.
So I'm going to start us down this road with yet another quote. And the quote is, "A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has been destroyed from within." Ooh. Now, powerful quote. That's actually by a man named Will Durant, who was a 20th century historian and philosopher. And it's the first image that you see on the movie we'll now be talking about, which is Apocalypto. That's a movie by Mel Gibson that came out in 2006. And the interesting thing is that quote was actually an excerpt of something larger, which is equally relevant to the world we're living in today. Here's the full quote. "A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within. The essential causes of Rome's decline lay in her people, her morals, her class struggle, her failing trade, her bureaucratic despotism, her stifling taxes, her consuming wars." Now, is America a modern day Rome? Are we ripe to be conquered? Could it be? I've wondered lately, is this the reason that we are on the verge of disclosure, that the powers that be want to maybe prepare us for the potential alien invasion coming? Obviously, we can't answer that today, and I know that's a scary thought, but I think the most important thing to take away from this is what we talked about in the beginning, which is there is a culture clash that happens in Apocalypto that does not go well for the indigenous tribes, and yet the whole movie becomes a metaphor for that idea that there's always a bigger fish.
Yeah, boy, I got to tell you, I love Apocalypto. And I know Mel Gibson is a controversial character. And I would like us to be able, folks, to separate ourselves from his personality, or whether you love him or hate him or whatever, and concentrate on what this film is about. Because it really does ask a brilliantly large question. And it doesn't really ask it even until the very end of the film. So the one thing I do have to say is, look, this movie, as Brent said, was made in 2006. This is not the kind of show where we can respect people that call spoiler alert. The ability to discuss what this film does needs for us to actually look at what it says in its entirety. So I guess if that's the problem, maybe bounce ahead 10 minutes and you'll be okay. But here's the thing. This is the story that takes place with the Mayan. Is it the Aztec or the Mayan civilization?
The Mayans.
It's Mayan, of course.
Yep.
Yeah. And the main character is a guy. It's so great. There's no English in it. It's
all subtitled. Yep.
It's all subtitled and very little dialogue at that. And the main character is this guy named Jaguar Paw, who is a hunter from a peaceful forest village, but he gets captured by these Mayan warriors, right? And they just destroy his community. His wife and his child end up in a pit. He ends up a captive, and he's forced to go back to this really horrific. You described the civilization that's falling apart from within. I think that describes what was going on with the Mayans at that point.
Absolutely.
Their plan is to march Jaguar Paw and his other fellow captives up to the top of a pyramid and behead them, and as sacrifices to the gods to try to cut them a deal.
Yes.
So all I can say is this. It's creepy. It's like being on a bad acid trip. It's just like his reality is shattered. He can't even imagine the cruelty that he's about to experience. The fear was probably so high that he can barely stand on his own two legs. It's so bad. Plus, he's worried about what's going to happen to his wife and child. Are they going to die in this pit?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And that is the only thing that motivates this character. He wants to save his family. And so he manages to escape, but then things go badly.
A couple things to touch on here, which is, as you pointed out, the Mayans are basically playing the part of the Romans. Their whole culture has fallen apart because of kind of the moral decay. They believe they are the people of destiny. They have the arrogance. They have the hubris. They're on the downfall. And in fact, the reason that they are sacrificing others to the gods is they believe that all the problems that have befallen their culture were because of the gods, not because of themselves. We didn't do this to ourselves. This is because we haven't killed enough people to make the gods happy. A very twisted point in the Mayan culture there. And I think to the other point, as creepy and as visceral and as savage as the movie is, I actually, before we get to the ending, which is in some ways the whole point of the movie, at least for our podcast, I took away one thing that I was very empowered by, the thought that how can somebody in that situation, when Jaguar Paw is on the cusp of being sacrificed, he's left his wife and son behind. And by the way, his wife is pregnant, about to give birth. That's the other complication. In this sinkhole, what gets him through? What pulls him through? Early on in the movie, he says to his son, before they're separated, don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Right? And the only thing that keeps the son going with the mother to help her through giving birth to a child in a sinkhole, and the only thing that gets Jaguar Paw through this whole ordeal is he stays poised. He doesn't give in to the fear. He sticks through it, and he has the courage to endure. And that Mel Gibson, obviously, having made also The Passion of the Christ, is a spiritual man. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the key idea of this is don't be afraid when the world becomes dark all around you. That phrase, don't be afraid, is in the Bible 70 times. Oh. And just to tie things all together, it's one of the key lines in Disclosure Day. Don't be afraid of the unknown. And so I think as we talk about what could be a possible terrifying outcome for humanity if we were ever to be invaded by aliens, I think that is something to hold on to, like that life preserver in the dark ocean. Don't be afraid.
I commend the thought, but I have to tell you, if what was happening to Jaguar Paw was happening to me, I'd be so afraid. I don't know what I would do. Well, and before we get into that ending, I have to tell you that a few years back, I was in an Anytime Fitness gym working out, and I'm just pushing some weights around, and I look over and there's Mel Gibson doing the same thing in my local gym. So I just went up and said hello. And I told him how much I enjoyed his film. And he was very nice about it, and he was appreciative. I think it's always nice if you're a director and somebody seeks you out to say it meant a lot to me. That's important. And so I told him that, but then I went the one step further and I said, and you know what's so interesting to me is, and I don't know, Mel, if you're involved in this or you think about this or whether it was part of it, but it sure felt like a metaphor for the UFO alien contact issue. He looks at me kind of askance, like, really? He did, by the way, as we talked, acknowledge, yeah, that would make a certain amount of sense. But it wasn't what he had in mind. So all I have to say, Brent, is if you and I are seeing it in this movie, the director of the movie apparently didn't see it himself when he was making it, or at least that's what he seemed to say to me. But, okay. So this doesn't go on forever because we have a lot of other things to cover. We got a couple of great personal stories. We've got several other films that we want to talk about in passing. So what happens here is Jaguar Paw breaks free, and he is pursued by the baddest ass Mayan hunters around, including one dude who is he just burns to kill this guy in a violent, torturing way. That's all I can say is, you know that if he catches him, that's that. And it's this incredible chase. It's not a car chase. It's so much better than a car chase. This is like a gang of highly talented, brutal mofos chasing you who has no chance through the jungle. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And so, you just know if they catch him, that's it. And that's game over. We're done. Yep. And nothing really appears to be available to stop them. And yet something does. And that's what's so great about it.
Yes. And what that something is, when they reach the beach, they see these incredible craft on the water, right? It's the boats coming of the Spanish explorers coming to conquer the New World. And oh my goodness, the looks on their faces, it's the way we would look if alien spaceships landed on our planet. And that's where I think you got the idea of that great metaphor.
What's so great about it is, okay, this guy is caught, gotten
dead
to
rights.
And once he's at the beach, he ain't getting off the beach. There's more of them than him. And so that's the end of the movie. And I think at the first time I saw it, I'm almost checking my watch going, isn't this the end of the movie? What? There seems like so much. Are they just going to kill him? Right. What? And then they stop in their tracks, and they have never seen anything like it. These are the Spanish galleons. These are major craft. And I believe at the same time, there are the guys getting out of it with the metal.
Yes. The headgear and
the headgear and the breastplates and the swords. And just so there's technology for that time. These ships are technology. The protective gear is technology, and everybody just stops in their tracks because they don't know what it is. The same way some of us might stop in our tracks if we were having a fight. Say you're having a fight with your next door neighbor about the fence and where it needs to be, and people are threatening to sue each other, and suddenly there's this craft above you. You're going to stop your fight. It's just going to stop you. There's just no way around it. So what I think is so interesting, if you replace the Spanish ships with alien craft, what happens is that everything changes. Because what the Mayans don't know, these Mayans who have been chasing him, is they don't know, are these gods they're looking at? Are they traders? Are they explorers? Are they invaders? Are they refugees? They don't know anything.
No.
Just in a way, given that we've had 80 years to study what's going on with whatever is going on right now, we don't know exactly what's going on. There may be people that do know. They haven't told us. Clearly.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the major reasons why everyone wants to know the truth. I think a lot of people believe they are out there. They may even be here. The big question is why? What do they want? Are we being threatened? Are we being observed? Is someone here to help us? It's a big spectrum. And I think the anxiety that people have about what the potential motives might be is legitimate. And again, if you look to history, most of the time, a conquering race meets a lesser race or a less developed race, it does not end well. So anyway, it's a really interesting movie.
Yep.
I'm glad you got to run your theory past Mel Gibson. It's very funny. When we come back, we are going to talk about Arrival and another movie, which I'm going to hold out the surprise of what that last third movie is. And we're also going to hear about Bryce's personal Apocalypto story.
I can't wait. Let's do this.
I'm Brent Friedman. Years ago, a family friend who became a cabinet member in the Reagan administration disclosed to me that aliens are real, they're here, and he'd seen them.
I'm Bryce Sable. Later, when we were producing Dark Skies, an NBC TV series about an alien invasion, we were approached by men who said they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence, and they wanted to give us inside information in exchange for access to our show.
We didn't take that deal, but we have never stopped thinking about it.
That's why we do this podcast. We're working out ideas in real time about how Hollywood has portrayed aliens and why.
Every episode is different because there are so many questions.
We're looking for answers. It's an active investigation. Let's do this together.
Bryce, without further ado, tell us your Apocalypto story.
First, I apologize. It's probably going to be a little long because I feel like I need to tell the whole thing. And Brent, it's a real story. I just wanted everyone to understand there's nothing made up about it. The whole thing is true.
Okay.
And in fact, it's a story that for years since it happened, and it happened 40 years ago. Okay, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Since that time, my wife is at dinner time would tell people, "Hey, Bryce, tell them that story." And I would
one
tell
of those
it,
stories,
and, yeah. And I would tell it like it was a comedy. And then I realized a few years ago, I could no longer do that. It was just too wrong. And I said, I have to tell this for what it is, which was one of the worst, most fearsome moments of my life. We're talking about like 1986. Okay. I am recently married and I have a pregnant wife. So I'm about to be a father. And I'm working for a show in Los Angeles as a director, producer. And the show is called INLA. It's one of those magazine shows where they do a lot of travel specials kind of thing. And I had done certain things for INLA that had already been a little dangerous. One of them was I did a Baja travel special where I nearly died because I ate some street food that the guide said, "Oh, this will be great. No problem." I went to Chichen Itza where they had a pyramid very similar to the one from Apocalypto. And yes. I got 2/3 of the way up and there was an opening and they said, "You can go out through there and then go down." I went out there. I was way far up and I got down about 10 steps and I realized the steps were teeny tiny and I could fall off this thing. And I froze. I couldn't go up, couldn't go down, nearly got killed on the Chichen Itza pyramid. Then came Borneo. Okay. So I get paired with this guy named Clyde, who's a Texan, and he's got this thing that we're supposed to do. He and I are being sent to Malaysia to scout locations. And then we're going to go to Borneo and we're going to scout locations there. And as Clyde assures me, we're going to go stay with some former headhunters in the middle of Borneo. Now, most people think Borneo is a place where it's the middle of nowhere. We were going to go into the middle of nowhere with headhunters. Now, Clyde assured me, "Don't worry about a thing, man. They haven't taken heads since 1946. So
that's not that far removed.
No.
Okay.
No, it really isn't. So what I did is back then, now we think of Banana Republic right now as a place where you can get some upscale clothing or whatever. Yeah. But back then it was more like a travel adventure place. So I know I'm going into the jungle. I go to Banana Republic and I buy a shirt with epaulets and with the big pockets and I'm doing well. I get cargo pants and I get this hat that I kind of love because the hat looks like Indiana Jones. Okay. So it's an Indiana Jones hat, brand new, very nice looking hat. Really enjoyed having that. I probably looked like a complete goofball. And on the video version of this, people will be able to see that for themselves. Okay.
Wow. That's exciting.
here I am with Clyde. We get on the plane to set the tone. We end up in first class. So I'm thinking this is pretty cool. And there's nobody else in first class. So all these flight attendants are doing whatever we want, which is giving us Dom Perignon to drink. So Clyde and I drink two and a half bottles of this over the 18-hour flight. And when we get to Malaysia, we're walking off the plane. We're having a good time. And we see a sign. And it's a skull and crossbones. And it says, Dada is death, which means drugs are death. Okay. So that kind of sobered us up a little bit. Whoa, what's going on there? And as it turns out, shortly after we were there, 2 Australians who were under sentence of death for drugs were hanged in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, not long after our visit. So there was a tone thing going there. So we did our thing in Malaysia, and that was, listen, it's a beautiful country. People can go there now and enjoy it very much. But then it came time to go do this scouting trip. So we get on a flight from Kuala Lumpur to, I believe, we're flying east to Kuching, which is the capital of Sarawak and the gateway to the rest of our adventure. And I know this seems like a lot of setup, but I just feel, damn it, you got to really understand the state of mind of what's going on here. Yep. We land at this small airport. And right now, if a visitor was retracing my steps 40 years later, man, you'd be on an air-conditioned coach, right? Things have changed. But this is 40 years ago. That's not what happened to us. We get to this small airport, and there's this ramshackle-like Jeep there, and there's a guide, this Malaysian guide, who's about 17 years old. He's just a kid. His English is broken. He's not the best guide around. It's what Clyde has found. Okay. And by the way, we're completely sober by this point. We've had a week to get our
I was hoping
together. Right. So this guy looks very young. His English is barely passable for tourism. And so we get in this Jeep and we drive for about 3 hours. And at first it's dirt roads. Then the roads kind of give up. They're not even roads anymore. They're just dirt. Right. And then they become something else. They're just nothing. And we're like bouncing up and down. And I'm thinking to myself as we're doing this, Brent, during this 3 hours, I'm like, Clyde hasn't told anybody where we are. How could he? No one knows where we are. My wife doesn't know where I am. The people at INLA don't know where we are. We don't have a satellite phone. We got nothing. Right. Nobody knows where we are. And we have just gone 3 hours into the middle of nowhere. And we reach the Scrang River. That's what it's called. You can look it up on the map. And we're on our way to what's called a longhouse, where the Iban tribe, the ones that were the headhunters, I think later I found out they were headhunters through 1952, but at the time we thought 1946. So I would have been even more scared.
How do you spell that? The
Iban, I-B-A-N. And Scrang, S-K-R-A-N-G. Scrang River looks like something made up. But anyway, so we get to the Scrang, and there is this kind of dugout-like boat affair. It's not great. It's small, and there's this motor on it that looks like it's from World War II. And we get in it, and we start going up the Scrang River. It's like Heart of Darkness time, right? Because at first there were a few settlements on the side, and then pretty soon nothing, and we just keep going. So we've gone 3 hours on the Jeep. Now we're 3 hours on the Scrang. And as we get up there, we just realize how very alone we are, because soon nobody's there. It's just jungle cutting in on the river. But then eventually there is a longhouse, and there are the Ibans, and we get off, and our guide is the one that translates for us. And it's an okay thing for a moment. They used to take these long, what would you call it? The blow darts.
Blow darts, yeah.
And so they gave me a chance. I thought, oh, wow, this is great. I get to practice with the blow dart. There's a picture of me doing that. And I'm thinking, this is intriguing. I blow darts, because they would actually paralyze people before they would probably behead them. Okay. The other thing is, we were told that the people that had actually taken heads had tattoos on their hands, and there were some old dudes that did. So we're doing blow darts, we're doing that. And at one point with the blowpipe, that's all happening. And then they say, now come with us. And that's where they show us the skulls. And I'm not lying.
They showed you the skulls.
They showed me the skulls. There were numerous skulls. And I don't remember if it was a room or some raised storage area, or whether it was actually in the longhouse or outside. That part I can't quite, but I just know They were not Halloween decorations, Brent, okay? They were not replicas. They were trophies from this earlier era that had been preserved as objects of ritual and ancestral significance. They were important to this tribe, all right? And this was outside of my perspective. I didn't even quite really understand what I was seeing, okay? History was not buried at this point, Brent. I was in the room with it, okay? It was just very strange. All right. And now I also want to make clear, because I don't want to be misinterpreted, this is not a story about villains. I don't think there were any villains in this village. This is a story, and the reason why we're incorporating it is this is a story about communication, where two different cultures are going to see things slightly differently. So that night, we got fed, and it was fine. I don't remember what we ate. But then afterwards, the community gathered around a fire with the chief. Now, I don't remember how many people were in this community. I want to say 100, but I bet it was less. And we're sitting around this fire, me, Clyde, and our young 17-year-old guide. And the only diplomatic tool I possessed at this point, Brent, was to smile. To try to smile so that people could see I mean them no harm. And of course, I was dressed like an idiot, and they were smiling back at me. Okay. Now, this is where things get a little weird. All right. I was sitting there wearing my hat, and I thought it made me look competent, but the chief apparently thought it made me look like negotiable. Okay. At some point, he says something, and the guide gets a funny look on his face, and he's interpreting what the chief is saying in this imperfect English of his. And I'm getting the translation and getting increasingly frightened by the whole thing. And the chief is looking at my hat, and the guide is getting a little concerned. And I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "He likes your hat." And I said, "Tell him thank you." And more conversation. He goes, "He wants your hat." And I said, "Oh, at this point, it's just a hat. I don't know what I paid for it." And I said, "Fine, I'll give him the hat." And then the guide shakes his head and he says, "No, you can't give it to him. That would dishonor him. He has to trade for it." All right, this is getting strange, but not quite apocalyptic yet. And I said, "Would I trade for it?" And I'm not making this up. I am not making this up. He says, "His daughter for tonight."
Oh.
And I said, "You've got that translated wrong. That can't be right." And he goes, "No, I think that's what he's saying." So the chief's daughter was there, sitting next to him. She's smiling. Everyone else is smiling, right? And they're all saying that the chief is going to trade his daughter to me to sleep with that night, and he's going to get the hat. And everybody will be respected. And I said to the guide, "Look, I'm married. I've got a pregnant wife at home. I'm not sleeping with anybody for the hat, right?" And at that point, I said, "You got to tell him, no, I can't do it." And he says, "If you refuse, you will now dishonor his daughter."
Oh.
So now, I'm not trying to dishonor anyone. I'm married, blah, blah, blah. And I make that very clear to him. And he's not happy. He's concerned. You can see it in his face. And we're all sitting around there, and we're all having the same event, but we're all seeing it so very differently, right? And it was tense. There's a fire, there's people, there's me, there's everybody. And I got an idea. I don't know where it came from. I just said, "Okay, listen, here's what you got to tell him. You got to tell him that this is not the best hat that we make in the United States. We make a much better hat. And for a chief who's as important as he is, he should have the best hat available. And that when we come back, we will bring the best hat for him." Now, I was never going to come back at this point, but I'm telling him.
It's a good pitch, though.
It's a good pitch. And that's exactly what I said to the guy, Brent. I go, "You got to sell this." So he tries to talk me out of it, but he agrees, and he tells him this. And this is the part where it gets really strange then. I guess it's already strange, right? So we're all sitting around there. The guide has told the chief that we're going to bring him a better hat. And suddenly nobody's smiling and nobody's talking. there's just all these people sitting around this fire, and they're all kind of looking at me, and then they look at the chief, then they look back to me. And I'm looking at the chief going, what is he thinking? Because I have no idea. I don't know what he's thinking. And then this goes on for about a minute. Now, listen, a minute is nothing if you're screwing around. But if everybody's quiet in a tense situation, it feels like an hour or 10.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Time stops.
And then finally, the chief kind of studies me. And then after about this minute, he breaks into a smile and everybody's happy. And it sounds like he's accepted this thing, right? Okay. All right. So I think now we've set the stage up that cultures can collide and see things very differently. And it looked like I was getting out of that one. So then they take us to where we're going to spend the night. And there's some mats or cots or something, and me and Clyde and the guide are there. And now I was scared, right? Because I thought, what if they change their mind or whatever about this headhunting thing? I don't know. And all I can say is, because I was a CNN correspondent in another lifetime before that, I met a lot of people. So I'm pretty good at studying people and seeing what I think they're thinking. And all I can say is I looked at the kid, the guide, and he looked more scared than me. And I was scared. So I said to him, why are you looking like that? And his take was, I'm worried that he only was saving, he didn't use the phrase saving face because he didn't have that language, but he said basically he was only doing that for the group, that you have dishonored him and his daughter, and that we're in trouble. Now, Clyde, good old Texan boy, he's like, forget about it. It's nothing. Everything's going to be great. So all I knew is I had a wife and a son I'd never met back home, and I intended to meet them somehow. So I said to the guy, we're leaving. Because
just like that?
Yeah, we got to leave. And now everybody's supposed to be asleep. So we realize we're going to have to start up this engine. So we wait till dawn because it's pitch black. We couldn't turn on. We didn't have. We had to wait. So at the break of dawn, Clyde and me and the guide sneak out to that boat that we've got parked out there. We get in the boat as quietly as we can. We float it out into the river, and then we hit the engine, and we start motoring up the Scrang. And I've got images of guys with blow darts chasing us with machetes or whatever they took the heads with. Who knows?
Wow.
And mercifully, that didn't happen. We got 3 hours up the Scrang. We got 3 hours on the Jeep. When we got to the airport, I wanted to kiss the freaking tarmac. And all I can tell you is this. If you want to know a little bit more about it, Anthony Bourdain went there, I believe in 2005, and had a weird experience himself. But that was 20 years after me, and he still freaked out. Then he went back 10 years later for another show. And okay, I know that's gone on forever. I know how these things work, and we'll probably have to cut it in post. But I feel like I've never told that story as a scary story. It's always been a comedy. So it wasn't a comedy. And
it felt nerve-wracking. It had the classic aspects of the story where it just kept ratcheting up, getting worse and worse. I'm glad that you survived it. I'm glad you're not a skull in their trophy case, because we wouldn't be doing this podcast, among other things.
In fact, by the way, Brent, that's what's so interesting. If it had gone badly, I'd have just been erased. My wife would never have known what happened to me. My body would never have been recovered. My to-be-born son would never have met me. And the people at INLA would always have this mythical story of the producer they sent who never came back.
Yeah. Wow. It's so funny because your story reminds me of one of my favorite movies, which is Cool Hand Luke, and that famous quote, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." And back on point to the theme of the episode, you were left there with a translator, a 17-year-old, trying to broker a deal, and you had no idea, like you said, what the chief was actually thinking.
Correct.
Of course, I probably would have done the same thing and just hightailed it out of there at the middle of night and hope that you weren't going to be chased.
So I guess the moral of the story I'm glad to have a chance to tell that story publicly, frankly, because it gets it off my chest. I feel better having exercised that little ghost here. But I do think it's important because these are human beings. This chief was intelligent. I'm intelligent. We weren't trying to be in a conflict.
Right.
And yet we were.
Yes.
That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. And so I think it's a nice segue into our next movie we're going to talk about, which is Arrival. And Arrival, for those who have not seen it, and oh, by the way, all the spoiler alert cautions that Bryce said earlier apply obviously to this movie. Arrival, really quickly, was directed by, and somebody help me out here, Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, I think you're close.
That's my best shot.
Sounds like the way Google pronounced it, so I think you're safe there.
Yes, and that director has done some really remarkable movies. He did a movie called Prisoners. He did a movie, Blade Runner 2049, which was the sequel to Blade Runner. And then he is the director behind the current Dune trilogy that is playing out. And I believe the third movie comes out next year or later this year.
Yeah.
So a really accomplished director. And the movie is about Amy Adams, who plays a linguist that is recruited by the government, recruited in the sense of you can't say no, to come and figure out how to communicate with aliens who have just landed these huge ships all over the earth. And because that's not a one-person job, her co-star is Jeremy Renner, who plays a theoretical physicist that has also been recruited. And their whole job is to try and analyze the alien language and make sense of it so that they can actually communicate, so that humans and aliens can communicate. And that really is the whole gist of the movie. That's the whole plot, really.
The whole conceit is that somehow they must teach us their language.
Yes.
Right? Now, there's advanced beings. They're the ones that cross the galaxy to get to Earth. And I kept wondering two things. She uses a little dry erase board, and I'm like, why is she doing that? But as you explained it to me, it's probably because they didn't want to have the technology in there or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm giving that.
Because they're going inside their spaceship to talk to them. Yes.
Yeah.
The aliens.
So if they're the advanced beings, Brent, why didn't they do more to help learn our language? Why was it important that first we had to learn theirs? Even if they were going to teach us something important, wouldn't they be able to do basic things like she's at the very beginning, she's pointing at herself and saying her name. And
yes.
I'm walking as she walks and things like that.
No, it's a great point. And obviously we'll get to it in a bit, but that us learning them language is a whole plot twist at the end of the movie. And so you just have to kind of go along with it. I will say, if you haven't seen the movie, one of the more interesting depiction of aliens that I've seen, because they are not humanoid in any way, shape, or form, they're called heptapods. The best way I can describe them is a cross between octopus and Jabba the Hutt. But they're scary. They're large and they're formidable. And you got the sense that if they really got upset, things would go poorly for humans. But needless to say, I think the idea was that they couldn't come out of the ship. They were not ready to interact with our environment. So we had to go to them. And the way that they spoke was this kind of visual language that would appear on kind of the glass between us and them, almost like us going to visit fish in an aquarium, right? That was kind of what the whole thing felt like. And we'll come back to the whole language thing because it really is the key to the whole movie, and not just thematically, but from a plot standpoint. I think one of the things that I thought was so fascinating about the movie was actually the poster. I remember when I saw the poster, the marketing slogan was, "Why are they here?" And this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Right. Yes, exactly. Why are they here? To have a whole movie that just explores why are they here, I was really excited for that. And one of the other things that comes of that is that this is something that we didn't even consider. The notion of, are they coming here to farm us? Are they coming here to conquer us? I think the why are they here is something that was not on my bingo card in terms of what aliens would be coming to Earth for. What was your thought about ultimately the reveal of the movie and the whole point of the movie?
I saw this film. My family and I had gone to the Telluride Film Festival, and it was like the talk of the festival. And I remember we had to campaign and fight to get in to see it because it was just sending shockwaves. People were taken by it. That, yes, of course, the poster image, because it wasn't like a flying saucer hovering. It was sideways.
Yes.
And it was just hanging in the air, and it was gigantic, and it didn't look like a saucer. It looked very alien. So I was very intrigued to see it, and believe me, any questions I have about it now, I have, because I've seen it several times, enough to even think about it. When I first saw it, I didn't actually have any issues because I didn't understand half of it. And part of the reason I didn't is because it really is about time. It is about space, obviously, in that they have traveled space, but it's about time. The reason they're trying to teach us their language, as I understood it, or I understand it now, is that that was necessary because in the way they view time, and in fact, I guess the way time is in the laws of the movie, we think of it as a linear thing. It's like a river. You get born, you go down the river, and it's not like the Scrang River or anything, but it is a river. And they're saying, no, all time is going on. And they're aware of all time. And they're saying that some 3,000 years in the future, mankind is they're going to need mankind's help.
Mankind's help, yes.
And so they have to teach us how to think about time.
So they're coming in advance, in preparation of an event in the future where they're going to need mankind to be upgraded. And I thought that was the most interesting thing, is that when you can learn to speak their language, it rewrites human DNA.
Yeah.
It upgrades us. It gives us this whole ability to see time and experience time in a different way, right? Now, that's cool for humans. Like, we get this new power, but at the end of the day, it was a very self-serving motive to come and upgrade humans because they're going to need our help in the future. Really fascinating.
Absolutely. And listen, again, I did not understand that. I knew it was about time, but I didn't get all of that right off the top, because on another level, they're playing it as more of the me and the chief talking about the daughter and the hat kind of thing, where it's like there's an exchange going on, but people maybe are misunderstanding, because the whole thing comes down to us rather trying to translate them. And we, with those, as you said, the kind of the dark, inky circle kind of communication, they've gotten down a heptapod phrase that they translate as, quote, offer weapon. And that freaks everybody out, because there's 12 of these things. They're all over the world. The Chinese have one, and we've got just one, but there's people all over, and because people don't trust each other, humans in this thing, we can't work together. So we've got 12 different groups trying to figure out what to do about this thing. But when they translate offer weapon, that's when we finally start getting together, which I think is the movie's metaphor for saying, see, we only respond to fear.
Yes.
Right. But in reality, what the Amy Adams character is trying to state is that weapon can be translated, in English anyway, into tool or gift or capability. And so she's trying to exercise caution, saying we're not 100% sure, but everyone else is getting ready for war.
Yes.
So that kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank goodness for Amy Adams, because that story would have gone awry and probably ended in the destruction of mankind were it not for Amy Adams' cool thinking.
Later, of course, you have the same kind of time weirdness in Interstellar, which also confused me the first time I saw it. But to get back to Arrival, I think Arrival is an important film because it is clear, as opposed to Interstellar for different reasons, but it is clear, to me anyway, that some form of NHI or non-human intelligence from some other place, might be extraterrestrial, something else, don't know, but somebody else is trying to interact with us, or is interacting, whether they're trying or not, they may just be doing it. And so the idea that they are a technologically advanced civilization to us means we need to do a little extra homework. We can't necessarily plan on the other guy doing the right thing by us.
Yes.
So we better be a little more proactive about so we may need fewer generals and more linguists out there, is the moral of that story.
Yeah. And I think even going back to Apocalypto, I think if fear is your first response, you will be creating a world based on fear, and it will end badly. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Be open-minded. Now, if you're conditioned to think to serve man and that it's going to end badly, then it probably will. And so I think that's a message we should all absorb, not just in terms of how we interpret the movies, but whatever is to come with disclosure, keep an open mind. We don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know. Which brings us to our third movie,
Yeah.
The New World. And The New World, which I'll let you set that one up a little bit, but I just want to frame it in the sense that it's really a continuation of the end of Apocalypto.
It's why we put Apocalypto and The New World in the same episode. Even though neither one are alien movies in any way.
Right.
They're metaphorically alien movies. The New World came out in 2005. Terrence Malick directed it. He's an enormously talented director, but it's nice and slow and that kind of thing. So you either like that stuff or you don't. But that's not why it's such an interesting movie. It's the story of the founding of Jamestown. And of course, for those of you who know, this is not the story of Thanksgiving. It's the story of Jamestown. Thanksgiving is up in Plymouth. This is the relationship, though, you've all heard of between John Smith and Pocahontas. That's the story, right? Which has been enormously simplified to kids over the years. And so what's lovely about this thing is they really stretch it out and make it come to life. And John Smith is played by Colin Farrell. If you think about Apocalypto, it's all the prequel. It's like the society before anybody else shows up to disrupt it. So 9/10 of that movie is about that society. Then that 1/10 at the end of Apocalypto is where you see, oh, new technological society shows up. Now what's going to happen? And it doesn't answer that. You fill that blank in. Now, what's great about watching these back to back, which I did just last week for this thing, is if you start watching The New World, it literally is that scene. The New World begins with the ships this time belong to the white European settlers. These people are coming from Europe. They've got the big ships. They've got the breastplates. They've got guns, right?
Yes.
These people are showing up, and then you got the Powhatans, the Native Americans. They've not seen this before. They're leading nice, peaceful lives, and suddenly these people just show up on their shore.
In the movie A New World, John Smith, the English kind of settler, finds himself basically a stranger in a strange land, right? He's coming in and he is living amongst what feels like savages, and what he discovers is the beauty of this new culture, right? To the point that he falls in love with Pocahontas. Now, my story is not a love story, but I was a stranger in a strange land. And the way it all began was back in the early 90s. I was doing some work for a movie studio called Cannon Studios, and they did a lot of big action movies in the 80s and 90s. And they had made, get this, a 10-picture deal. Maybe it was even a 20-picture deal with Chuck Norris, right? Chuck Norris, before he became the internet meme, was a big action star, right? Even before Texas Walker Ranger, he was making movies like Delta Force and Missing in Action, and he was a big action star. And action, in case you don't know, action movies translate very well internationally. Okay, so all of that's important. So I get hired to write a new action movie for Chuck Norris. Wow. Okay. This is exciting.
Yeah.
What's the story? They said, what we want to do is we want to film this movie in Israel, where we have a movie studio that we just built, and we'd love to film it there. And because we're going to be filming it there, why not use that culture? Now, this is a very different Israel from the Israel we know today. This was in the early 90s. And so I had never been to Israel. And despite my name, I am not Jewish, but I thought, wow, this sounds like an amazing adventure. And what they wanted me to do was to write a movie that paired Chuck Norris with an Israeli cop and do an action buddy comedy.
Okay. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So I was being sent to Israel to spend 2 weeks as a ride along with an Israeli cop so I could get to know what it would be like to be in Israel, to be a policeman, get to know that character so I could actually maybe even base everything that I was going to write on this cop who was going to take me around. And of course, Chuck Norris would be playing some version of himself. So off I go to Israel, and they put me up in a really nice hotel in Tel Aviv. And I'm told for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be meeting with this cop, and he's going to be driving me around. And so fantastic. What I was told was he's an Israeli vice cop. So the first day comes, and I get dressed up to go. I think I'm going to go to the police headquarters and learn about procedures and how they do their work. And up in front of this very nice hotel pulls this old, rickety Ford Fiesta, grumbling and shaking and smoking and whatnot. And this guy gets out who looks like a cab driver, introduces himself as Shabby, and says, "You must be Brent, get in." And so I'm like, "Wait, but are you taking me to the cop?" He goes, "I am the cop."
Oh, Shabby the cop.
Shabby the cop. So I get into his Ford Fiesta and we start driving. And I was like, "So is this your car?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is my car." I'm like, "Wow, okay. This is what standard issue for police vehicles?" "No, we don't have police vehicles here." What I come to learn is that the actual vice cops in Israel have no budget. All of the budget goes to the military defense. And so not only that, he doesn't have a gun. He's a vice cop. He's going to go arrest drug traffickers and all sorts of stuff. He has no gun. They don't believe in them for police work.
Wow.
And so I'm like, wow, okay, I can already see Chuck Norris is going to have a field day with you. This is really interesting. This will be fun. So he says, "I'm told that you're here to research for a Chuck Norris movie. This is very exciting to me. I'm a big Chuck Norris fan. I'm going to let you do my job today." I was like, whoa, we're just getting started. And so he says, "We're going to go make a drug bust, and I'm going to show you how it works." And I'm like, okay, thinking, we're going to make a drug bust? And this is where I'm really getting anxious about this idea, but you don't have a gun. I'm coming from America where it's like it always ends in a shootout when you're trying to make a drug bust.
He's asking an unarmed American to make drug busts in a foreign country.
Yes. Also,
Excellent.
I need to do a sidebar on the unarmed American. I am wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt, appropriate of the times, and I am in no way dressed for DEA style work. I'm just to set the stage here. So we're going to go make a drug bust, and we keep driving further and further out of Tel Aviv. Now, if you've been to Israel, you know the further you go out of Tel Aviv, it's getting a little sketchy, and it's not even that it's a worse part of town. It's just that it's like there's less and less town. You're getting further away from civilization. And we drive for, I don't know, what seemed like an hour or so, and we get to what he defined as an Arab ghetto. Now, I actually didn't know that there were Arab ghettos outside of Tel Aviv, but there are. And it was a big cinder block building. And it's just getting dusk about the time that we pull up there. And he says, "Okay, here's how it's going to work. Everyone here is selling opium." And you're going to see lights start flashing in the windows, right? That are the code for this is what I have and this is how much it is. Okay. So all we have to do is sit here and you pick a window and that's the person we'll go up and bust. And I'm thinking, I thought I was going to sit in the car and wait for you to go make the drug bust, or maybe I'll watch from a distance or something, but he's making it sound like I'm going to be part of this drug bust. So I'm like, okay, I'm like, okay, that window, that looks good. So up we go. There's no elevator. We walk up all of these stairs. We get up to the 4th floor. We come up to the door and he says, "Okay, Mr. Hollywood, I'm sure you're going to have a scene in the movie where Chuck Norris kicks down a door. You need to know what that feels like. So kick it down."
Oh my God.
I'm like, "Me? You want me to kick it down?" He's like, "Come on, you're a big guy. You can do it." So I'm like, okay. So there I go. I try and do the Hollywood move to kick it down. I almost blow out my knee. My whole knee just reverberates with pain. He's laughing hysterically. And he goes over and knocks on the door. And an old woman opens it, looking at us like, "What are you doing here?" And he says something to her. He speaks her language. And she rolls her eyes and opens the door and lets us in. And he kind of motions to me. Now I'm limping. I come in the house in this little apartment, And there's two teenagers, these Arab teenagers, that are sitting on the floor watching an old black and white TV, and they're watching The Love Boat, for whatever that's worth. And he turns to me and he says, go ahead, ransack the place. Look for the drugs. I'm like, ransack the place? I don't feel comfortable doing this. And he's like, no, it's fine. We do this all the time. Just go ahead. So I'm like very carefully going and opening drawers and being very polite. And meanwhile, the grandmother is in cooking dinner in the kitchen, looking at me, glaring at me. And I'm like, I'm trying to be very respectful. I'm like, after a couple minutes of just pretending to look for drugs, I'm like, nope, no drugs here. Let's go. Didn't work out. Sorry. This was a great learning experience. He's like, no, I know they're selling drugs. And so we walk out and he says, I'm going to catch you. We're going to catch you tonight. We close the door. We go back downstairs. I'm like, wow, that was great. I've learned a lot. I need to go write all of this down. You can take me back to the hotel now. And he said, no, you're going to be with me for 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, every day for 2 weeks, I'm going to come and we're going to do some version of this. He goes, no, we're together for the next 2 weeks. I go, what? No, I didn't pack anything. So you don't need anything. You'll be fine. I don't need anything. At least I don't even have a toothbrush. So you'll be fine, you Americans. We get back to the car and I'm like, okay, so where are we going now? And he's, oh no, we're going anywhere. You're going to arrest this guy. I'm like, I'm going to arrest him? I'm not a cop. He said, no, you do the arrest and then I'll step in. I'm like, what if he shoots me? He's like, he doesn't have a gun. I'm like, how do you know? He's like, nobody has guns. I'm like, okay. So sure enough, after about 15 minutes, one of the older of the two teens comes down to make a sale. And he pushes me out of the car and he goes, go get him. Now, by now, it's like a hot summer night and there's a bunch of people out in the parking lot milling around like it's a social thing. And now I'm chasing this teenager. And everyone starts clapping and cheering, and I'm chasing him around in circles in the parking lot. And I'm in long khaki pants, not dressed in any way appropriately for this. And sure enough, I can't catch him, and Shabby steps in and trips the kid when he runs by him and goes over and picks the kid up by the shirt, slaps him twice across the face, and says, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. No, get to jail. And the kid kind of nodded, and that was that. And he was going to go check himself into jail the next day. And I was like, that's not how it works in America. And he said, no, these people, they have problems. And it doesn't matter what culture you're from. If you've stooped to crime, you need help. And that's when you go to prison to get help. And there's honor in that, in asking for help. And I was like, wow, okay, this is going to be a very interesting movie with Chuck Norris, because that's not how Chuck operates. So I'm thinking, okay, now it's 8, 9 p.m. I said, okay, so now what are we going to do? Where am I going to sleep? And he goes, we're going to sleep in the desert tonight. I'm like, what? He goes, oh, it'll be beautiful. You're going to love this. And so I'm like, okay. And he goes, yeah, I have a special treat for you. So we start driving. And as we get off the highway and we get further and further into the middle of Israel, just like you, suddenly we're not on roads anymore. We're on dirt roads. And then pretty soon we're not on anything. We're just driving, right? And that's when I noticed that the passenger seat is not bolted to the floor of his Ford Fiesta. Yeah. And by the way, he was one of those Middle Eastern drivers who drives with two things, his gas pedal and his horn. There is no brake. So he's got music blaring. He's smoking a cigarette. He's got the gas pedal to the floor. We are off-roading in an old Ford Fiesta, and my seat is not bolted to the floor. So I am like on a roller coaster ride from hell, getting sicker by the moment. And we're just driving for what feels like hours. And it was hours. It was probably like 1:32 in the morning when we finally come to a rest, mercifully. And we hit this kind of crest, this ridge, looking down into this massive valley. And it actually wasn't a valley. It was an old dry river, like a massive, like I'm talking like Mississippi River, like huge thing. But that's not the interesting thing. What was amazing was as far as you could see in every direction were tents. It was a tent city stretched out across in the middle of the desert with lanterns and I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, what is this? And he goes, these are the Bedouins. Oh. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Bedouins are this ancient culture that is basically allowed to roam as nomads all across the Middle East, and they don't recognize borders, and they have this kind of mystical way about them. And most people don't get to meet the Bedouins, but Shabi, my guide, knows how to speak Bedouin. And so
Bedouin
down
is
we
also a language. It's a
apparently
language.
Whatever it's a I guess it's a nuance. It's like a dialect or something.
Sure,
but he had interacted with them before, and he knows how to speak their language. So down we drive into this old dry riverbed, and we start just driving through the tent city. And in the middle of the tent city is this big top, and it's where the elders all meet. And they sit around making plans for the next day and the future and whatnot. So he pulls up his Ford Fiesta, and we walk right into the elder tent. And inside this tent, which was square, there's sitting around the perimeter of about a little more than 3/4 of it, are all these old men in robes with long beards. And they're sitting on pillows. And we walk in, and everyone goes, Shabi! Shabi! And I'm standing there, not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. And they're talking to him and asking him questions. And he's pointing at me and saying something or other. And I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. I've seen a Bedouin tent, but they've got a lot of big work to do here, so we're going to leave. And then he waves me over, and he goes, they want you to stay, and they're going to do a ceremonial coffee for you. And I'm like, why? And he's like, here's the thing. I tried to explain to them that you were here doing research for a Chuck Norris movie, and all they could really understand is that you're Chuck Norris.
Oh my God.
And so I notice everyone's looking at me, and I'm like, do they even know who Chuck Norris is? And he goes, he's very popular here, and they are very honored to have you here. And so just play along with it. And I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? And he goes, sit down and look important, look tough. And I'm like, okay. So everyone scoots and moves, and they give me this honorable pillow where I'm like sitting in the middle of this whole big tent. On the side, I'm looking, and these elders are looking at me like, this is a moment where if we had cell phones back then, they would have wanted a selfie with Chuck Norris. By the way, I met Chuck Norris through all of this. He's about a foot shorter than me. Very nice man. I look nothing like Chuck Norris. But there I am. I'm sitting there, and over in one corner of the tent, it's all partitioned off, and there's a bunch of women in veils making coffee and fresh pita bread. And now that we're having this ceremonial drink, out come all of the platters, and everyone's getting their coffee and their pita bread. Before I get on with the rest of the story, I will say it was the best pita bread I've ever had. It was amazing. Also, but Shabi hadn't fed me yet for hours, so I was voraciously eating pita bread. And I was given what looked like a double shot glass of coffee. And I, at the time, did not drink coffee. I just didn't drink coffee. And so I really didn't even drink soda pop, so I didn't really have a lot of experience with caffeine. But they make a toast. They say something or other. Shabi's not translated. He said they're talking about how wonderful you are and this great American who's come to visit them. And so he says, now it's time to drink. So everyone takes the thing and they put it to their mouth. And I'm, okay, I don't drink coffee, but I guess I'm going to do what the natives do. I put the thing to my mouth, and it's like a can of wet dog food. It's like, it's not even liquid. It's like this gunk. And I'm going like this, like it won't come out. And then all of a sudden, the entire contents of that little double shot glass go into my mouth. And not only is it horrible tasting, it's gushy, and I don't know what to do with it. And it's in my mouth. I can't spit it out in the middle of this like ceremony. So I just swallow the whole thing. And as I swallow the whole thing, I notice that Shabi is looking at me like with just this blank face. And every elder is leaning in and looking at me. And the elder next to me goes, Chuck Norris. And I'm looking at Shabi, and he goes, you're going to die. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, that coffee is supposed to last a whole day. You touch your tongue to it. You drank the whole thing. We have to get you out of here. You're going to die. And I'm like, okay. So I get up, and everyone's like, Chuck Norris, like looking and waving at me like, They just saw the most incredible feat. Chuck Norris just lived up to his name. And in fact, years later, I started to wonder, was I the one that started those internet memes where Chuck Norris is indestructible? Did it start in that tent?
I think it might have.
So there I am, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm not feeling anything yet. And Chubby gets me in the car and he's like, the happy-go-lucky guy is gone. Now he's like looking like, oh my God, I'm going to get this guy killed. And he's driving like a madman. And all of a sudden I start to feel the ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk on my heart. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, here we go. And I feel like I am having a heart attack. My brain is throbbing. Everything in my body is off. And I go, Chabi, it's really hard to breathe. He goes, I know. It's going to be okay. So we're just driving I don't even know how long. It was a blur, but he takes us to the coast, to a kibbutz where he knows somebody, right? And a kibbutz is this like living community, right? A shared living community. And it's this beautiful beach. And by now we've been driving, it's 6 a.m. and the sun is starting to come up. We get to the beach and he goes, get out of the car. I'm like, is there a doctor here? He goes, no doctor. You just need to walk this off. Just walk back and forth on the beach and do not stop and keep breathing. You'll be okay.
You have to be reminded. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So that's what I do for the next, 8-9 hours. I just keep walking on the beach. Meanwhile, he falls asleep on the beach, right? And pretty soon my heart starts to slowly work down. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to survive this. I go over and I wake him up and I'm like, can I please go back to the hotel now? And he goes, yes, I will take you back now. That was the first day of 2 weeks on that research trip. By the way, the movie did get made. I was only one of a number of writers that worked on it. It's called Hellbound. It is set in Israel. It is the story of Chuck Norris, a cop from, I believe, Detroit, who works to solve a crime with an Israeli cop. So there you go.
I just enjoyed the hell out of that story. Wow. I'm just imagining you as Too Much Coffee Man walking on the beach for 9 hours while the guy who said you're going to die is sleeping. I can't even imagine what you're thinking. There's a lot of similarities in our two stories, though. We're both on assignment doing preliminary research for what will become a shoot. And by the way, my thing became a shoot. Clyde went back later to the Headhunters and actually shot a show there. I did not go. And I want to tell you something because I want to see what your relationship in your story to it is. I came home from what happened with the Headhunters and I quit my job. That's how I went into INLA and I just said, you guys, you didn't care about me. You put my life in danger. You had no plan and you barely paid me. So see you later. And I quit. That was the last thing I ever did for that company, which is interesting. And I'm wondering, did you have any reaction to what had happened to you where you made any life-changing decisions or anything?
They offered to send me back to Israel to do research on another movie, which I politely declined.
Yeah.
And not because of the country. I just felt like I've been the stranger in a strange land long enough. And who knows who they would misrepresent me or recognize me for if I go back over there. Look, I know this is all crazy. This is one of those episodes where it's like, wow, the way they're trying to weave all of this together. But I do think that this all kind of leads us back to that idea of the New World. And I think if you look at the three movies we've talked about, and the New World is, granted, it's not an alien or UFO movie, but it is about the culture clashes. It is about the assimilation, right? And I think we can now look at America and we can see what happened to the indigenous people of North America. And I think when we step back out and we try and extrapolate, what would that mean for first contact for us with aliens? Have we learned any lessons in the history of human civilization about the best way to approach this? Because for many times, some subset of human has been the dominant race, right? Yes. That has come in and been the conquering race. And we as Americans certainly have experienced that. But what happens when the shoe is on the other foot? What happens when somebody that is far more advanced than us, that has more technology, more intelligence, more capability in terms of Maybe they exist above time, like the aliens in Arrival. How will we respond to that? What lessons can we take from these movies, from history, and hopefully do the right thing? Is it as simple as just don't be afraid, be open-minded? I don't think so. I think that's a good place to start, but I actually think this is going to be one of those situations where when first contact is made, it's going to be essential that we have the right people like Amy Adams on the front line, making the right decisions, and most importantly, figuring out how to communicate in the most mutually beneficial way.
In a future episode, by the way, we are going to take a look at some more alien-like films where the clash of civilizations is alien to human. I just wanted to end on one thought here. We have talked about some great films that you should see. Most people who are into this world probably know about it and have seen Arrival. It does get better on a second viewing, even though, because you do tend to get a little deeper in it. Definitely enjoyed Apocalypto and The New World. And frankly, if you're going to watch them, probably watch them in that order. But with a thought for everyone, something that's brand new out there is something on Apple TV Plus called Chief of War. And that's our good friend, Jason Momoa, of course. And it's about the same thing that basically in the 18th century in the Hawaiian Islands, where the Hawaiians themselves were in the middle of internal conflict between themselves when the colonists show up. And the whole thing, you have the collision between the indigenous culture and this other culture that has guns, for example, right?
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. I've only watched a few of the episodes, so I can't comment more than that, other than to say, if you're intrigued by this idea, it does sound like a good one. And the one thing that First Contact, I think the commonality between them all, Brent, I'll just try to summarize this. First Contact doesn't happen all at once, at least in these films. First Contact unfolds through stages. So at first, it may be jaw-dropping curiosity, but it's still curiosity. Then there's this sort of period, at least in these, of cautious trade, misunderstanding. Things become unequal in the exchange. Then one society becomes dependent on the other, and obviously the less technological one does. And then this transformation. And if we don't want to be the society that's transformed negatively, we should be thinking about these things now. And I guess the way I look at it is, if indeed we have been contacted or in the middle of a NHI contact for 80 years, we as a society have been deprived of the time to get our brain around what's happening, our communal brain. And I think that's unfair. So I wish the powers that be will take that seriously and at least move forward in, again, not laying out every single detail. Certainly there are other ways we're going to have to look at it, but at least let's get on with the idea that it's happening. If it's truly happening, let's get prepared for the best possible outcome that we can manage. That's where I'd leave.
Hallelujah. Agree.
Yeah. Soundlight and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson, and for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the skies.